next guest thinks of that. Outstanding Kings beat writer for the Sacramento Bee, Jason Anderson, with us. How are you, Jason?
I'm okay, guys. How are you doing?
Good.
What's
We're
up,
doing
man?
great now because we've been kicking around all these players. What about this, that? We think the Kings should pursue free agent. He's got a player option. Jaylen Smith. We think he'd be a good fit for the Kings. What do you make of that, Jason?
I've liked Jaylen Smith since the time he came out in the draft. I think potentially he could be a guy that would work for them. Obviously, would address some of the things with the size and length. Young guy. I don't have numbers right in front of me, but
42% on threes last year, Jason.
That was my question. Yeah, and he came out. He shot the ball pretty well in college, and I could see Jaylen being a guy who would fill a little bit of a need here.
There we go.
All right, we got that. All right, check that one off. Jason, when you look at the offseason here, how would you rank how critical of an offseason this is for Monte McNair? Or, one thing we talked about is maybe they make some small moves, but then go for a bigger fish at the trade deadline. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's big, regardless of how you look at it. And you need to be smart and you need to be measured in how you do this. Obviously, you're trying to find a big upgrade some way, somehow. In the absence of that, though, you need to kind of preserve, like Monty talks a lot about flexibility, being aggressive, but also disciplined. And those are important things. So, if that, I know people have been frustrated in maybe the last calendar year that, didn't do this last off season and didn't do that at the trade deadline. But set you up for what you can do later. So, I think they need to continue to be, somewhat measured in what they do, not make a big mistake. You can't whiff on guys, whether it's the draft or free agency. You need to bring in guys who are going to help, going to fill needs and make your roster better. So no matter how you look at that, it is a big off season. I'm sure they will try to go make a big move or an impactful move where at least you improve or the depth and some of the around the margins a little bit. And then if it just so happens that there's a big fish that you can go get somehow, I think they'll be ready to go ahead and make that move. But you do have to be smart and disciplined.
Today's Kings media exit interview focuses on Jason Anderson from the Bee. Jason, you addressed some of the things already here, but what do you think this Kings team needs more than anything else this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, we've been saying it for some time now. It's size, it's length, it's athleticism. When you look at some of the issues they've had, like go back to mid-season before the All-Star break when they were just getting absolutely torched from the three-point line. That Mike had to kind of resort to really technique-focused teaching on closeouts. And he told us like he had never had to work so hard or emphasize so much what the proper technique was on closing out on a shooter. And it's not because these guys don't know how to play basketball. It's because they lack the size and the length to really contest shots. And so when you have that size and length, your technique doesn't necessarily have to be as on point. But with this group, you had to really focus on those things so that you were able to like contest at the highest level that they could, and they got better in that area with that focus on the two kinds of techniques that they use to close out on 3-point shooters. And so it's when you do go get bigger and longer and faster, if you can, then you have a little bit more margin for error. And that that's just one example I point to where that stuff matters. But that's just the league is changing and moving in that direction, and you need big wings who are 6'8", 6'9", and can play some D, can move their feet, and hopefully you get somebody who can shoot the three a little bit as well.
Hey, Jason, as we continue to talk the off season here, and we'll dive back into what happened this past season, but you've been around for a number of years. You understand this fan base. And I hear you talk about, preaching patience in the organization and, really being measured in what they do. How would you gauge the level of patience versus impatience from the Kings fan base right now? Because it seems like, the thought is, we got to go for it now. We got to strike while the iron's hot. How would you gauge, when you go out in public and talk to people and just the mood of the fan base right now about what they want Monte to do?
Yeah, everybody wants to win right now, and I don't blame them. There's not a lot of patience. We saw this really, Kyle. We've seen this for 16, 17 years. I mean, all through the drought. Like this is a fan base that has just been starved for success and something to wrap their arms around for over a decade and a half. They got a taste of it last year. Nobody wants to give that back. And this was a tough year to take a step back, to miss the playoffs, losing the play-in. It's tough. It's really tough to digest for these fans. And they're not wrong. And I think the Kings need to, and they know this, but the West is brutal. And the reason they slid back this year was a combination of, one, the injuries, two, the West being better, the ascent of the Thunder, the Timberwolves, the Clippers being healthy, the Mavs making a jump. Those things all happened, and those teams are here, and most of them are not going anywhere, like not in the immediate future. And then, by the way, you got to watch now. You got to watch out for Houston next year. You got to watch out. Memphis is going to be back.
San Antonio
is going to be on the rise. Utah eventually is gonna figure it out, and so this is not going to get easier, especially in the next year or so. But you do have some aging teams in the West, and with the right moves, a lot of the players have talked about continuity. Where I don't think this team needs wholesale changes. They need kind of a combination of moves like what Dallas did at the break, where you improve around your guys and you make those. So that's really where I think they need to go with this. Frankly, I'll give you a couple numbers here that are interesting to think about. The Kings were 30-22 against the West this year. The only teams that were better in the West were OKC, Denver, Minnesota, and Dallas. The Kings split or won the season series against the top 5 teams in the West, and they went 17-11 against the top 7 teams, but they were 13-11 against the bottom 7 teams. And so we harped on that all year long. Stop squandering these games. Stop letting these games go. You can't give those away. And when it all adds up at the end of the year, they just gave away too many of those. So you got to correct that. You got to improve the roster to whatever extent you can. And then you go for it again next year.
Jason Anderson from the Be Nice Enough to Join Us. Jason, you won't believe this, but today on ESPN, they were talking about the Lakers. They were talking about, yeah, I know. They were talking about Darvin Ham and when he goes, and Mike Greenberg just kind of blurted something about, well, I hear the one they want is Mike Brown, and that's what I'm hearing. I don't know where that came from, but we do know that there's been a lot of talk about Coach Brown's contractual situation. What is your read right now on the situation between he and the Kings?
Yeah, I think Mike's done a great job. He was the unanimous coach of the year in his first year. They ended a 16-year playoff drought. Monte and Wes obviously had a lot to do with that. As you guys know, I raised the question mid-season and a few times about whether they were completely on the same page in terms of the offense and defense debate. But really nobody's wrong. It's a good conversation to have. And I'm not convinced, Monty, when we asked him about their defense and whether specifically, I asked him, are you guys on the same page here? And he said, well, we want to get our offense back to where it was. And Mike would not disagree with that. But Mike is also not wrong in insisting that this team become better defensively, because he's been to the playoffs and he knows that's what it's going to take to win there. So they made those strides this year, particularly late in the season. They figured some things out. I think it bodes well for them that when, the when the NBA started, I don't know, officiating things a little bit differently, to like the Kings were one of the teams that performed well under those circumstances, to the point where they were top 10 in defense down the stretch, and even top 5 in certain segments. So, the Kings have figured some things out there. De'Aaron took a huge leap. Keegan took a huge leap. And on the De'Aaron point, I think he deserves a lot of credit, because of all the players on that roster, he was the one who, at least in my eyes, was the one who would echo what Mike was saying the most, and also insisting on everybody like putting in that effort and getting better on defense. So you're building that into the DNA. And to circle back on Mike, like he said it pretty plainly. Everybody knows this is the last year of his contract, and he wants an extension. The reporting from The Athletic was that the following year is a mutual option. And so that would make this essentially a lame duck season, to use that term. So, I think they'll figure it out. I don't think, I don't think it really is I don't think it's in the Kings' best interest to move in a different direction right now. To circle back on the word continuity, everybody knows that's important. You don't just get there. The Nuggets are a good example, where they had to be patient for a while with their roster and with Michael Malone, and then eventually they figured it out, and they've been rewarded for that patience and kind of sticking with the program. So I think that's where the Kings are. I think that's probably where they'll end up moving forward with this group.
Hey, Jason, where do you think they are with Keegan Murray? Do you think they were satisfied with year 2? Did they make the strides they expected? How did you view year 2 for Keegan?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a mixed bag. I think the biggest thing was, the improvement on defense, and chasing De'Aaron around all summer, and maybe Baby Rain too a little bit is going to, he obviously became a much better defender. And if you can get him to become an elite level, like perimeter stopper, then that's just the best thing in the world for this group. And I think that's part of why we saw them get so much better defensively late, was you had, you have De'Aaron like guarding the way he was guarding. You had Keegan able to like really guard 1 through 4, and in a lot of cases, depending on who you wanted to put him on. You had Keon step in, and Davion come back into the rotation. And so now you've got like some legitimate perimeter defense to go along with Domas, who I think is the best rebounder in the league. And so when you can start to, that's where we saw those improvements. So that was great for Keegan. His 3-point shooting obviously dropped a few points. They need him to get to where, he's going to be a 20-point per game guy. Like, and his potential, I think, is probably even higher than that. He could be, 21, 22, 23 points a game, I believe. But there's give and take, and some of that with what you're asking him to do defensively. There's some natural like ebbs and flows for this is just second year guy, right? And so really he's not going to be a finished product for maybe another year or so. But I think all in all, what we saw from Keegan was encouraging. We know he can score. We know he can shoot. The shooting is going to be there, and we also saw him become more of a 3-level scorer this year, where he had a little float game. He was a little more aggressive, getting inside, even getting to the rim and dunking on some people. So all in all, I would say, those were all good signs from Keegan this season.
Jason Anderson from the B with us, and I want to thank Jason for coming on, because last time we saw Jason, do you remember, Drapes? It was out there. We were out there before the Warrior play-in, and he's hurrying to get a spot in the media room. And you're like, hey, we're on it. Come over here. And he's like, I can't. Come over here.
I'm like, don't do that to us, Jason. Don't do that.
I figured we're never going to have him on again. And here he is. So we appreciated Jason. Comfortable. This is a question I should say that Kings fans are not comfortable with. Do you think Malik goes? If he does, how do the Kings even attempt to replace him?
Well, they don't if he does go. I mean, obviously you would go use the MLE, and you would do the best you can. You would essentially use kind of the money they initially signed Malik on. And you can do that under the MLE, but you'd have to go strike gold again. And maybe they can. I shouldn't say they can't replace him, but there are there are things that you can't replace in terms of just his presence and his, his charisma and what he means to the group and the locker room. Whether they, it's really a tough question. It's not going to take. The Kings are limited. Everybody knows what 4 for 78, I think, is the number. Comes out to, I don't know, what is it, 19, basically a year over 4 years with the raises built in. Somebody can come over the top, and if somebody gives him $20 million a year, I don't know that he necessarily is going to go. If they, that number gets to 22, 23, where it's to the point where, he's turning down like an extra 10 or 12 million over the life of the contract. I think that not only Malik, but some of the people in his camp who make business decisions for him are going to, have to think that maybe that you can't turn that down. Everybody has to cash in now and then, and this is his first chance to go get a really big contract. But there are only so many teams that can put together an offer that is in that ballpark, and those teams might be chasing other guys. And so I think it will see. You look at Orlando, Detroit, Philly is one that's interesting because they're going to have a ton of cap space to go along with. But like I hear they may go make a run at Paul George, and if you're doing that, you're not going to have the money left over to chase Malik. And so it's going to be Malik's going to have to weigh all these things. Like what are the numbers? How much does that team want him? How much does the situation change from a winning and losing standpoint? Because I don't think he wants to go be just a part of a bad situation again. Right. And so those are all factors that him and his team will have to weigh, and we're just all going to have to wait and see.
Jason, as a Kings fan that I am, I'm worried about the Malik situation. I think it's a big offseason. I'm nervous. Give us some glimmers of hope. Sell us on, an exciting upcoming season. What can Kings fans really latch on to and give us some positivity as we get ready for this offseason?
Well, okay. I mean,
all right, maybe I got the wrong guy. I'm sorry. Maybe
Michael Martinez we're talking to.
I need some positivity here, man. Listen, I'm worried about Malik, Mike Brown, everything right now, man.
Yeah, no, not my job for one, but two, I do think I can sell it, and really, it's not all doom and gloom. I know how it feels coming off of a play-in loss. But you have Mike Brown, you have Monte McNair, you have Wes Wilcox. These guys have all been like tremendous. They've done their jobs here better than anyone we've seen in those positions in many, many years. You have an all-NBA duo of De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. You have, a real chance to bring Malik back. You have Keegan Murray, who's going into year 3 and has potential to be an all-star level player as well. You have some nice pieces. In terms, when you look at like Trey and, even Sasha, I think could really have a better year next season after some like just a huge life adjustment this year for Sasha, with some injuries on top of that. Speaking of injuries, you had a lot of injuries this year, and nobody expected it to be as good as last season. And then, conversely, you wouldn't expect next year to be as tough as this year was in terms of games lost due to injuries. You have Kevin Huerter, you have Harrison Barnes, and people can feel how they want to feel about those guys, but number one, they're starting level. These are pros, and Harrison is just, I don't know. I really feel like Harrison is underappreciated sometimes because. And I get the inconsistency
there
stuff.
You go, right there, my guy.
That's we have to say it. But he is like the utmost professional. He's a bucket getter. He can go inside. He can shoot the three. Still shot 39 point something from three, I believe, this year. And so and some of that was a product of just changing the offense and who was getting those shots, right? And the same was true for Kevin, who was asked to be. More of to really focus on the defensive end. Kevin talked about how the threes they were getting out of the DHO were really difficult. Like you're sprinting around a screen and then rising up and shooting. And he was really good at that. Keegan was really good at that the first year. But teams adjusted to how they defended the Kings after, they had the number one offense of all time. Like, teams are going to figure stuff out and take stuff away. And so the Kings are, kind of in a part of a growing process. So, they're working through that stuff. There were some growing pains this year. If you're asking me to sell, the fan base and the city of Sacramento in the future, I think you look at all the things you felt good about in year one under Mike Brown. You look at, some of the strides they made in year two in terms of the defense, and you hope that you get guys continuing to grow and reach their potential and put all of those facets together going into next season.
Look at that. He bailed you out again. He goes, well, not my job, but okay.
As the elite point guard that I am, I gave him a little softball, lobbed it up for him, and he threw it down with the dunk. I appreciate that, Jason.
Hey, that was behind the back, high and off the mark.
Off the mark,
Off the mark.
I know.
Great catch by Anderson.
But excellent job, man. You can handle everything, anything.
Do you think they're going to use their pick?
Toss up.
Gotcha.
Totally toss up. They, we'll see. That's the 13 pick. I think they would have rather gone to the playoffs and conveyed that pick to Atlanta, which would have opened up, maybe some more desirable options with trade packages. But they could go make the pick and then trade the player. They can't just trade the pick right now because of the pick being owed to Atlanta and the Stepien rule, which you guys have probably discussed. But I guess one way or another they will make the pick, whether they keep the player or trade the player.
Right.
That just kind of depends on what's out there and what they want to pull the trigger on.
Thanks, Jason. We appreciate it very much. We'll talk to you soon.
Anytime, fellas.
All right, Jason. All right, man.
Great play.
Yeah.
On an errant pass.
On an errant pass. He saved me. He made me look good right there.
He did.
He gave me the assist.
When we come right back.